So we're going to take a look at the, maybe I should leave that up so that I can see if anybody has a question. We're going to take a look at Learnosity, which is the name of the authoring platform, and see just the kinds of activities people have been creating, and then get a sense of any challenges, questions people have had, examples of things that we think were well done, things that we think could probably use some improvement. The very first thing that I wanted to point out, just so I don't forget about it, is that we did notice that some people were putting high and low on things other than vocabulary. We only really want to see high and low notations and variations for vocabulary exercises. It's not necessary. In fact, we don't want to see multiple versions of anything but vocabulary. Is everybody following that? You can just, say yes in the thing, or actually, better yet, just let me know if that's unclear. You can put a question in there. The reason we're doing multiple levels of vocabulary, is because, different students may find a high-level vocabulary challenging, but we don't need to see multiple levels of anything else. So, it's fine what you have so far, and we may do some editing or modifying, but just, we do see some high and low skills here and there, and let me see if I can find an example of one. And I'm not trying to call anybody out here, so don't feel bad about it or anything, but like, do you remember where we saw this? Down? Down. There at the bottom. Okay, so here's a high-level skill. Just not necessary. Also, where was that really cool skill? I think, was it Melissa who did that? That one that had the multi-part one? Which one? The vocabulary one we really liked? I think it was Melissa, but I'm not sure which one it was. Let me see. Can we sort by people? Yes, if you go to the top, to find by tags, you can type her name there. Find by tags. Okay, let me sort. Sorry, Melissa, we're calling you out. For a good thing, though. No, you have to click there. Oh, great. Okay. And then click search to the top. Search. Okay. That's all her stuff. All right. Wasn't this one? Was it this one? Yeah. Yes, okay. So we particularly like this one. And in general, I would advise not doing too many activities that have lots of parts to them. However, I do like this one because, this was a creative way of breaking an activity that has a lot of words into parts that are digestible for students. So while I would advise not to have, an activity with like 5 separate questions in it, because I think that's just going to be overwhelming for students. So I would prefer not to see an activity with like 6 multiple choice questions in it. But this isn't really the same thing. This is really a single activity that you just broke up into digestible chunks. So in this case, I actually thought this was a really good idea. So, one really long paragraph would probably be really overwhelming for students. And the other problem is that if you made this one really long paragraph, if the student gets one of these wrong, then they're automatically going to get another one wrong. So that's the problem with these matching exercises, is that if I put this here and this was wrong, automatically one of these other choices is going to be wrong too. However, the good thing about breaking this up into pieces is that you give the student sort of another chance here in the next exercise. So in this case, I think was actually a really good idea. So kudos to you, Melissa. So, I don't necessarily think we want to do this in every single case, but I do like this format. So, this isn't a bad idea. I do think we want to avoid, however, and I'm not calling anybody out, this is not picking on people because, Kyle and I, we made many of these exercises, and a lot of our choices probably were not good ideas either. So this isn't in any way a case of, one person did a good idea and one other person did a bad idea, but I just, want to just use these as learning, opportunities. Where was that one? Is the second one? Oh, here. The long one? Yeah. So, Mary, one thing I want to suggest is just your individual ideas for the actual specific examples in here were all actually just fine. But probably we want to limit a specific exercise to really no more than one of these. I don't think that generally when we say a skill activity or a content activity, generally this, can you all see when I'm circling this? I think you can. Generally, this would be the example of an activity, not all of these. I think that if we gave the students all of these to do, that would be really overwhelming. And also, it would take a really long time. I mean, you know, not that long, but like, you know, I think we prefer to keep these to really not too many different parts. You know, I understand that we talked about how getting DOK levels up is multiple steps, but multiple steps doesn't necessarily mean multiple questions. It means that the actual exercise that students are doing has multiple parts to it. So it might be that the instructions say, read this short, you know, read this short little reading, and then the students have to do something with that reading. So there might be multiple parts to the activity they're doing, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's actual multiple different exercises within the activity. So, you know, I think that our goal is currently, our thought process is not to have lots of little parts to this, because that's just, it's too much, and also I think tracking it would be very difficult. It starts to look more like a quiz and less like a quick little activity. So let's try to avoid having lots of little parts. So I'm going to give people an opportunity. Does anybody have a question about that? If you do, please feel free to post it here. I'm going to pause for 30 seconds and let people post a question here. And if I see one, then I'll open it up or you can feel free to unmute yourself and say it verbally, either way.
I have a question, if I may.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
You know, the problem that you pointed out, I'm not really sure how to do each assessment. Like when you say one question, does that make up one item? And is one item one assessment? Because I'm not able to, I'm not very familiar with the digital part, so maybe I sort of tag them all together. I'm not sure.
Okay. So was it your goal when you were looking at the table of contents?
Yes.
And you were trying to do like Unit 1, Lesson 1. Was this all supposed to be just one activity?
No. This like how many people are there in the Jamal family? That was one item.
Okay. So the mistake that you made here was that once you were done with that, you were supposed to go and leave that, and then you could have gone here and then click on the Create button, and then find a template. What you sorry, what?
And do new tags for the new section.
Where am I going?
To tag.
This is in the way. Sorry. Go to. You would add your tags. You'd pick your template under Add New, and then you'd save all of this, and then you'd have another template. What you did was essentially you built a single activity with multiple items in it, which is actually an advanced thing. But we've decided for our purposes in this project that we're not going to be creating any activities that have multiple items within them.
I get you, but I stopped my work and was doing it on a Word file precisely because I knew that I was going wrong somewhere in the digital part, you know, like the tagging or the creating. So you say that once I did...
sorry. The only thing you did wrong was that rather than creating a separate item for each one of these, you put all your items in the same activity.
Right, right. So the first question that I put in, that makes up one item?
That makes up one activity with many items in it.
No, what I mean is, like if I ask a question about the Jamal family, does that make up one item?
Yes.
And yes, and then this one item is one assessment. Am I right in understanding?
For the purposes of this project, one item is one assessment.
I see.
Because we are not, just hold on, we are not creating assessments with multiple items within them.
Right. And one more question about this. How many assessments should there be per lesson? Like
I believe,
everything that is, so
I
everything
believe
that is taught should have an assessment?
no. I believe the TOC outlines which specific assessments go with which particular lessons. If you look at your TOC, it'll tell you that.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Did you see the TOC? The TOC outlines like this lesson has this skill item and that content item, and wherever it says vocabulary, you're doing a high and a low.
Okay. Yeah.
Was that clear to everyone? If it was, please just write a yes in the chat. Okay.
So, hello?
Yeah.
So every vocabulary assessment should be in two parts. Like if I take up one word, for example, family, I should describe, one assessment should be in words and the other one in visuals. Am I right in understanding that?
You are not.
No. Okay.
So when a lesson has a vocabulary exercise, all of the words for that vocabulary exercise should be done in high, and all of the words should also be done in low.
Okay.
So all of the words for that lesson are done in a single vocabulary exercise. That single exercise is done in high, and then another single vocabulary exercise is done in low. If you look at the examples, you'll see that. So,
Okay.
I mean, take a look at any of the examples of the other vocabulary exercises we do. You'll see that they contain multiple vocabulary words in them. Those and if you look at the vocabulary list, you know, you'll see that the vocabulary list lists multiple words per lesson. It's not a single word per item, it's multiple words per item.
Right. Each lesson has about, say, 5. In my case, grade 1, unit 1 may have about 5 or 6 words in the vocabulary set.
About that. So for grade 1, unit 1, lesson 1, you would create an item at high level with 5 words and an item at low level with 5 words, approximately.
Right. Okay, got it. Okay.
Great. Okay, so moving on, and everybody should be on mute again. Great. So DOK levels. Oops, let me put that back on. DOK is tricky because, I mean, it's not always so easy to assign a DOK level, and honestly, you're just going to do your best right now and follow the guidelines as best you can. And we will, as we go through, we'll assess and analyze the levels that you assigned, and if we think that they're basically on point, then then there's nothing more that we're going to do. And if they seem super duper off, then we'll take a look. Mostly my big concern is if I see a lot of 3s when there shouldn't be 3s. 3 is definitely the hardest DOK level to achieve because really students need to be taking multiple steps. And multiple steps doesn't mean multiple items within a single activity. It means like the students have to be doing multiple different things to get to their level of understanding. So, let me see if I could find that example of that one that I'm talking about. The truth is there isn't a science to this. It's kind of honestly I'm not even sure that there's an art to it. It's really to a certain extent it's very subjective. I'm going to say just do your best to try to say how many different steps do I think the student had to take to achieve to get to the answer in this, and assign that as your DOK level, and that's really all we're asking for. Kyle, is there anything you would add to that?
No, that's pretty good.
Okay, so I wouldn't obsess too much about it. At the end of our first week, or nearing the end, we're going to take a look at what you've done, and we're going to see if we feel like what we've said is accurate, or or if at the end of it, do we feel like, maybe we need to be more precise? Oh, one.
Frederica has a question.
Frederica?
Fact and opinion.
Okay. Fact and opinion one. Let's see. Fact and opinion. Where is that? Oops. Did not mean to click on that. Let me see can I search by it by fact? Like if I type in that, will that pop up? Yeah, okay. The first one or the second one?
I think they're the same. One's high level, one's low.
Presumably the high is the 3, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Okay. You labeled it as DOK3. Okay. So, facts. Okay. So, let me go back up. They had to justify their... Okay, so interesting. Label the fact and opinion with the best justification.
When I was looking at the DOK3, I noticed they said that if they could justify, like you'd have to have them take it a step further.
I see.
I was trying to think of how I could make that into the item. And so when I was doing high and low on skills, because I was kind of playing around with how can I make it, different ways to achieve harder, like DOK3 versus 2. And I was also just kind of learning the platform.
Oh, sure. So here's an idea, and we'll have to be careful with this because obviously one thing that we can't count on when it comes to students is what their home or school life is like. But one thing that we can experiment with throwing into these is something, and if people think this is a terrible idea, then feel free to shoot me down because I'm not any more an expert in this than you guys are. But like one thing that we can do when it comes to steps in something like this would be like if you wanted to add something like justification, you could say explain your opinion or to a classmate or to someone at home or to
generally, okay.
Yeah, so like, it doesn't have to, like, just because it's digital doesn't mean there can't be some component that's not digital. Like, what do you think about that, Kyle?
I agree, but I think it was really clever now that
Yes.
I understand the intent.
Right, I like the idea. The only tricky thing is whether or not the students are going to understand.
Yeah.
So like, I feel like that adding that like one little extra bit that might help us figure out like how they're justifying it might be a good idea. But I like that general idea. Like just like if we don't put in something that makes them like tell somebody, like tell their teacher or tell a classmate, tell somebody in a pair, tell somebody at home. They might not have anybody at home, so that might not be a good idea. But otherwise, generally, like you're really close.
Okay, and I was just kind of like, and justification for second grade, I think is hard. I don't think all second grade would know that word.
Right.
I was just trying to I was really just toiling around with it to see how can I make it harder? How could I make it easier? And so that's where my thinking was. How do I make it work this way? Could I do this?
And that's why I would say, like, you could add this extra statement. Like, if you're worried about the word justification, you could say, and then explain to whoever you want it to explain to, a classmate, once you get back to class, why you chose your answer, or something like that.
Oh, okay.
And that that's one possibility. That might just give us an extra layer of DOK. That also doesn't mean we have to use a complicated word. And I think that one thing that we can remember about these digital exercises is that not every single step in the DOK has to be done digitally. Like, I know that our goal is to have everything be trackable, but like, the answer is going to be right or wrong, regardless of what they say to their classmates, right?
Right.
But like, we can or their parents or whatever. But that extra step can still happen. Like, that's one thing that I want us to get creative about, is just because, I mean, like, everything that we're doing here is going to be auto-trackable. What I mean by that is the computer is going to be tracking it. But that doesn't mean that we can't try a component that doesn't take place in the computer, as long as it's kind of like extra. You know, we can have them say something to a classmate, or talk about it, or compare their answers or something. But we just have to make sure that what they're doing isn't redundant. Like, why did you choose that? I mean, like, it might be a little bit redundant, but like, I mean, this is something that may require some creativity, or like, especially with like those charts that we have where you can where things fit into multiple columns. Like, it's a really tricky thing with auto-gradable things where there's definitely a right answer. Reaching DOK3 can be tricky. So I'm going to be open to people coming up with creative solutions, and if you guys think of something really cool throughout the next week.
There were some cool ideas in the chat here.
Oh.
And when I was doing this, I was playing around, and I got very comfortable with the items, the choices at the top. But I agree with Melissa that I'd like to have a little bit more insight as to how the bottom ones work. There's one like record text, right? I have to play around with those, but thank you.
Oh, sure. The record template to record their thinking. How does that one work?
Click edit and let's play with it.
Okay.
So add it as a new one so we don't disturb what she's done.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think on other here on the left is a record and num.
Where did you guys see the record template?
Features. To the top, scroll up, features.
Okay.
Oh, that's audio playing.
Where did people see the record
template? It's under
template?
written and spoken.
Oh, okay.
I think you have to go up.
Audio recorder?
Yeah.
Yes, the written and spoken. Yes, that's it.
Okay. Oh, okay. This is cool. So yeah, you could. I'd say you could have the student. It is possible the student could. I don't know. Maybe can they record their response?
Yeah, that's what this is.
Okay. So then this is something really clever. We'd have to play with how it works. But one thing we know even a kindergartner can do is record something. So I'd say, do you want to try it?
Sure.
Okay. How does it work?
Just click preview, and then we can pretend that this is the stem of the question. Justify your answer. Then they click record.
Justify your answer. What was the question? What were they supposed to be doing, Frederica?
Just talking to it. Oh, you don't have a microphone.
Oh, I don't have a microphone.
It was
Let's pretend that I just said, I like ice cream. Okay. Then, they recorded it, and then they shared it with whoever, and the teacher then could see what it was that they did, and then that would be gradable. I mean, like, we'd have to play with this, but even if it's not auto-gradable, it's still gradable. So, like, I think we may have to be, something that we'll talk about with Aaron, we may have to be more flexible about the notion that everything is auto-gradable. Because I don't know. I know that we're imagining that we don't want to do a lot of writing, or at least long writing assignments. Because I know that writing assignments are something that they're going to be reserving for the printed component of this. But I feel like it would be foolish of us to avoid using really cool components like this one. And this is like a speaking exercise, so like certainly feel free to put speaking exercises in if you feel like there's a great idea for how to use one. So like justify your answer, like, yeah, I mean, certainly it doesn't have to be an auto-gradable, like, you could just have an additional one question at the bottom. Why did you choose what you did? That doesn't even have to have anything to do with just matching. It could just be an additional question, like, of any kind, in which you can ask students to record an answer.
I could see that really helping, especially people with limited, handwriting skills, or like more Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'll play around with it. But I could also see it being justified, like give an example of an opinion, because you're talking about fact and opinion.
Yeah.
I was just looking for ways to take it up a notch and, you know, increase the depth of knowledge. And so that's where my justification playing around was coming from.
This is a fantastic way to increase the depth of knowledge on a huge variety of different kinds of questions, in my opinion. Just this one, I mean, this is fantastic. And I think that just not only that, but also for really shy kids, I think they'd be far more likely to answer this than they would be to raise their hand in class and say what they think. My suspicion is that. I mean, I don't know what you guys think, but that's my instinct on that one, that a lot of kids would sooner answer this than they would be to raise their hand in class. So, great. I love that.
Click back to item on the right there.
Where?
On the right.
The right.
Yeah.
Where am I going?
Up. Yeah.
Back to item.
Click a pencil on this.
Yeah.
Melissa had a question about on the down. Go down. No, you don't need to pull the question up. I got it here.
Okay.
Go to the left and go down.
Yeah.
She had some questions about the more options down here.
Okay.
So, good news is you don't have to worry about any of the more options.
Okay. I just as an FYI, most of these have nothing to do with creating the questions. So
yeah, stay above up there where there's shuffle options, drag handle. That's all fine, but the more option stuff is nothing to worry about.
It's very programmy stuff. Let's go back and reopen this. Great. Okay. Cool. Let's go back because I did want to talk about what is a high versus what's a low kind of vocabulary. Let's just get out of fact. I noticed that there was, let's talk about not only what's a high versus what's a low, but also just difficulty of questions in general. We noticed that a lot of people were making low questions that had matching in them. And I want to be really, not this one, let's see if I can find an example of that.
That one at the bottom of the page right now.
Oops, this one?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. This, in my opinion, is probably not a low-level question. People might be assuming that it is because all the kids have to do is drag and drop. But the reason why I think it's not is because I'm not looking at all about what's right or wrong here. So I'm just matching here. The fact that I put this here means that if I'm wrong, which I am, then I'm definitely wrong about another one. And I'm in kindergarten here, so that's hard. And there's a lot of words here. So even though it is a little bit more visual, it's hard. So I would be really careful about this. I would say this is harder, actually. It's not a bad exercise. Just keep in mind, like, you know, which of these is kind of harder, and use restraint in using things that make it more likely for the students to fail. And by fail, I don't mean like fail your course. I just mean it makes the student more likely to get things wrong. Because the student, basically, if they got one wrong, they got two wrong. Does that make sense? So
click on edit.
Yeah.
Edit the pencil of this question.
Okay.
Scroll down just a little bit. So duplicate responses, that option will allow them to use the same word multiple times.
Okay. That's cool.
Just FYI, in another activity, if you guys wanted to use that feature, that would allow them to use the vocabulary of the word in more than one area. So if they got, you know, one wrong, they're not necessarily getting two wrong with that feature.
But if you do that, you need to let the students know that that's true, because that might confuse them. So just because they can do that doesn't mean that they think that they should do that. So, like, if the student sees that, they might see, oh, I put past here. Does that mean I should put past here too? So, like, the direction should then say, you can use the same word more than once. I think that that might be hard, so you might not want to do that. But you can. So, another thing to be careful of, let me see if I can find an example of where we saw this. sometimes I notice that people aren't using all of the words. So let's say you have 6 words, but you've only used 4 of them, and 2 of them aren't being used. Do you remember where we saw that? Does anybody know off the top of their heads where they had an example of that?
I think I did that in the first ones I did, because I wasn't sure. I felt like 6, kind of like the example, I was wondering about your expectation and the parameters, and I wasn't sure if I was just learning and I wasn't sure. So I think I put like 4 of the 6 words, and now I'm hearing that you want them all in, and I like Melissa's example of how to group them differently.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you.
Yes, and I had another example that I thought was, where was that one that I did? I don't know if, can I search by myself here?
No, you're not in here.
I'm not?
Not as an author.
Really?
Did you ever tag anything?
Would I just have to well, is this
You
also
know the
chronological?
content, you can search for it. It's not necessarily chronological because when you edit something, it goes to the top.
Oh, but I haven't edited anything recently.
Okay, then it might be in the back.
It's probably here. Let's see. I think I might have an example or 2 of something like that. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, okay. So I'm not saying that this is necessarily a fantastic exercise because it's really hard. The one thing I like about it, don't follow my example in terms of difficulty. The only thing I like about this is that it shows you another way that you can separate words.
And by only having a couple of choices for each one.
Right. This has a lot of choices, but you could have 2 choices.
Yeah, someone made a question like that had 2 choices,
right.
And that was good.
Right. The thing that I like about here is that you could, for example, have a short paragraph here, and then you could have a single question at the bottom that's unrelated or that is related, but that you don't necessarily have to put everything into a single paragraph. So this was an early one that I did, and by the way, I actually think this is a terrible exercise. It's way too difficult. But the one thing that I think did work about it is that in this paragraph, all the words are related, and then you have one down here, and all of this uses all the words that are in this lesson, but then you have this one at the bottom that didn't really fit in super well into the ones down up here, so I labeled, ooh, quick vocabulary refresher. So, I found some way of, adding a little extra bonus question at the bottom. So, however you want to group words together is fine, but just don't feel the necessity to try to cram everything into one place. You can break them up the way Melissa did, or you can add a sentence down here at the bottom to make it another question or something. I do want people to try to put them all in one item, but you don't have to try to put them all into the same paragraph. But I do think we should encourage people really to try hard to get all of the words assessed in some way. So if there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, 6 words, then try to assess all 6 words, because kids, we don't have that many exercises for kids to do. So I really do want them to be able to learn all of the words that are in that particular lesson. Especially keep in mind that we may be doing both a high and a low, but the same child is not doing both of those exercises. That may be something you guys didn't realize. But as cool an idea as that would be, each child is only doing either a high or a low, not both. Theoretically, a teacher could change a student's level, but the way we envision this is that a teacher will set a student's level, and then when that student logs into the learning environment, they will either see the high or the low. And later in the year, if a teacher thinks a student has progressed, the teacher can change the student's level so that they go up to the high level, or they could go down if they think that they need an easier set of vocabulary words. But we don't think that any given student is going to be doing both. We could change our minds if we think that if it proves that we think students need to be doing both exercises. But right now, we don't think they will be. So just keep that in mind. That when you're doing these activities, I wouldn't put only some words in one or some words in the other or something. criteria for 5 vocabulary words. Is that the max? No. I don't think that there is a maximum. I mean, I think that in grade 3, I think that there's more. But I mean, I think that you guys all have access to the vocabulary word list. So, I mean, I would have to look, but I don't think technically, I don't think there is any maximum. I think we tried not to, in grade 3, I think we tried not to have more than about 8. But I think that the range is shorter on the lower grades, and it goes up a little bit. I think it's like 6 to 8 for grade 3. But I don't think technically there is any specific maximum. But I don't.
I was wondering, sorry, I'm hoping not to get feedback again like last time, but I was wondering with the K, like you have the vocabulary in 3 sections in Unit 1. So do you only want to see the vocabulary that's in that section? That was my reason for asking about the 5. So I was just wondering about that. So
asking about like if we want to review or repeat vocabulary later on kind of thing?
Right. Or if, like in the very first, you only want well, I think there actually is 5 in the very first, and then there's just a couple added in the next 2. So do you want me to continue to reuse, or do you want me to just focus on those new ones for each vocabulary lesson?
That's a really interesting question, and something that we've sort of struggled with a little bit about what to do when you either have a really large number of vocabulary words or a really small number. And I don't know that I have a perfect answer for you. I think at the present time, I don't think that we want to do review vocabulary. We thought about it, but I think that for now, we don't have any great solution for how to handle vocabulary review. So I think that for now, we're not doing vocabulary review. Kyle, have you heard differently from that?
I don't recall. I don't think I heard anything about it.
Okay, so I think we've talked about vocabulary review, and I think right now we don't have, we don't have a vocabulary review solution, and I think we're just doing new vocabulary. We may, later on come up with a vocabulary review. And also, one of the things that I think has been our approach has been that we can always expand this program. This is a brand new program, and because it's digital, this is a digital aspect. We can always add more digital components to it because this is a very flexible environment. As you can see, there's nothing stopping us from doing a whole new set of digital things and adding them. So we may decide later, it would be really cool if we just go back into the program and add a whole new set of review components. I think for now, our approach is let's just do the new vocabulary in every section, every lesson, that is. And then maybe next year, we might go back and say, okay, let's go and do review. So I think that's a really, good point. But for now, I don't think that we come up with a really good, method for how to handle that. So for a 2-word or whatever, really short, let me see if I can find the picture one. I think this was a really good example of a short one. Let me see if this was the one I'm thinking of. Yeah, this one. Everyone seems to really like this one. So this would be an example of like not a lot of vocabulary words. So maybe I would say if you're concerned about having a really short one, get creative and do something really fun when you only have 2 vocabulary words. That's an opportunity to do something unusual or different. Because, like you can see I only had 3 vocabulary words here, but, all 3 vocabulary words had opportunities for interesting pictures. That might not work super well if the vocabulary words are really strange or esoteric or don't suit themselves really well to pictures. Like, what if the vocabulary word was practical? Or what if the vocabulary word was, I don't know, something that really just wasn't very visual? Like, I mean, I can't even think of anything right now that's not visual, but there are a lot of words that just aren't very visual. Rapid.
Let's open it to questions.
Okay, questions.
I have a question, Eton.
Sure.
May I?
Please.
So I wanted to put in an assessment which says match the letter with the beginning letter of the word, and then I give them 5 words like father, mother, brother, sister, grandmother. And I give the letters F, M, B, S, and G. Now, which template would I use for this kind of assessment? I was not able to figure that one out.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Yeah. I wanted to put in an assessment which says match the letter with the beginning letter of the word. And I give them 5 letters, F, M, B, S, G. And I give them on the other side father, mother, brother, sister, and grandmother. So they're supposed to match the letter of the alphabet with the word, the beginning letter of the word. So which template would I use for such an assessment?
Sounds like a matching template.
Yeah, no, but somehow when I was doing that, I took it off because the answer wasn't coming correct. You know, when I clicked.
I can't speak to exactly why.
Ask her for example is here.
Do you have the example of the specific activity you were trying to create somewhere here?
No, I removed it because it was coming incorrect, the answer. So I thought perhaps my template was not the right one.
Well, an error in your exercise probably doesn't have anything to do with using the wrong template. Do you want to try creating it?
Yeah, I'll do that, and then maybe you can see whether it's, you know, what the problem is with that. I'll put it in again. In fact,
Sure.
I've done most of my work on a Word file because I was not sure how to go about this individual clicking, which you have clarified now. I hope I have got it correct. So,
Great. Okay.
So,
anyone else question?
I have a question.
Okay.
When in some of the skills, I was using the content from the second grade to try to formulate a skill to practice. Should I assume that if it's a second grade from the content, like of your folder, that they can read it? Or should I still kind of limit the amount of reading? A couple of mine are a lot of reading, and I just wasn't sure how much, but I get it now, and I'll go back and fix those. But I was just wondering, should we assume then that if it's from that folder that it's already been leveled for second grade?
So, good question. Yours did look like they were a little bit text heavy.
Yeah.
So I would say for all of the grades, definitely be mindful of just what volume of text you've got going on. Even if the text is coming from the manuscript itself, at a certain point, like just look at the question and just say, like, does this look like I've got too much text? And even compare it to the actual student book. You can see how much text is in the student manuscript, and I would just go back and forth between the two. You know, if you're taking it directly from the student book, that's good, but I felt like there was a lot of restating of manuscript, and you might not need to do that in every case. Sometimes you can go directly into the question, and in the skills exercises, it's probably not really necessary to reuse the content unless it's absolutely necessary for the exercise, and that tends to create a lot of, extra verbiage in the, so, I thought your questions were actually all really good. The one comment I would give you is just be really careful about the excess word count.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll fix that.
I have a question, one more question, Eton.
Okay.
In the lesson in grade 1, unit 1, the word in the text says Baba, and it does not explain who Baba is. Now, in different cultures, it could mean different things. Like I know in Bulgarian, it means grandmother, but in India, in one of the places, it means father. So should there be an explanation of who Baba is? Because the grandmother here has another name.
Do you want to email me specifically about where
Yes,
this is? I'm not sure off the top of my
I'll
head.
do that.
I can take a
I'll
look.
do that then. Sure.
Okay.
Sure, I'll do
'Cause
that. Yeah.
You might be right, and maybe we just need to clarify, do a little edit there.
Right.
I
Okay.
take a look. Great, thanks.
Okay. Thanks.
Will there be a tool to read the activity to the student? Yes. In Active Classroom, there is a read aloud function. All of the activities can be read aloud. What do you mean?
The activities can't be read aloud, but the text can be.
Well, the text of the activity can be read.
The activity,
Really?
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to work. Not sure yet.
Okay. Let's paraphrase. Let's rephrase. We're not 100% sure yet whether or not the text of the activities can be read aloud. We know the text of the student book can be read aloud. We're very hopeful. We say that we'd very much like it to. Is there a particular thing you were hoping to achieve with that, Melissa?
Not necessarily. I just know that kindergartners are vast, and some are going to come to you with nothing, not even letter sounds, and some will come reading. So I just thought, I was just wondering in the application, will there be an option for that? So that was my concern, because mine currently are very text heavy, so I may need to include a lot more pictures also.
Well, that's certainly something to be aware of in general, but I know it's something that we definitely want to try to achieve.
Awesome. So, the other thing I was wondering about was maybe a drawing tool.
A drawing. I don't believe that exists in our authoring platform right now.
Okay.
It would be lovely.
Yeah.
But I think that might be more of a down the road kind of thing if it happens.
Right, I understand. No problem. Just once again, I've got the lowest, so that was just something I was curious about. Thank you.
Sure, no problem. Anything else? Okay, so we've recorded this, and I will make the recording available to everyone. Certainly feel free to email me with any questions that you have that come up during the week. We're going to set 1 week from today as the date that we're requesting that you send in your that you finish completing the sample activities for the first unit that we gave you, and then after that we'll evaluate how those are going, and then we'll proceed with the rest of the project from there. So we thank everybody for coming today, and certainly feel free to contact me if any other questions come up. All right. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.